Today we have Gary Lloyd talking about presentation skills. Gary Lloyd, who's worked with us many times before, describes himself as a head gardener. He's a head gardener, though, in IT-enabled change, which he may or may not go into more details about why that is the case. Suffice to say, he has been a management consultant and also a purchaser of management consultancy for 25 years, which means he must have created and watched a lot of good and interesting content for presentations and delivered them with great skill. Is that not the case, Gary?
Hello, everyone, wherever you are. I'm going to try and do a presentation which is an example of a good presentation. And if I've got time at the end of this presentation, I'm going to go back quickly through the whole presentation and pick out some of the points that I'm talking about. But in case I don't do that, I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm doing as I go through and hope that doesn't confuse you too much. Now, I've got a couple of things at the beginning I want to ask for your opinion on. And if you go to menti.com and put in the code that you can see at the top of the screen, you don't have to put in your email address or anything like that, or register or get spammed. Just go to menti.com and put that in, and that'll allow me to ask your opinion. And if you also use that, you can either do that on your phone or through another window. If you ask questions through that, then the questions are going to appear at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, so that we can all see them and I can call them up. I'm talking today about presentation skills for consultants, and this is specifically about those type of presentations. So it's not a kind of call to arms presentation. It's specifically the sorts of presentations that you would be doing to a client. If you were trying to motivate people into political action, you might not do some of the things I'm going to talk about in this way. So let's get started. And what I'd like to know is what you think of the quality of presentations that you see at work. So if you go to menti.com, okay, people are very quick. And this shows the number is the average, and the humpback whale, shows the distribution. It's great that there's some people that think that, it's on a scale of 1 to 10, by the way. So the average rating there is that presentations are relatively poor of the people that voted. So let me ask you another question. This is a word cloud. You get to enter 3 words for this. I'd like to know what you think makes a bad presentation. Come on, there must be more than 8 people with an opinion. I'm going to keep going until you get it to 20. Okay. All right, you're holding out on me. Okay, now, don't you love it when you start reading and it starts moving? Thank you for the other people that jumped in. Too much information. Yeah, absolutely. Too many words. So reading text off of a slide, just what I'm doing at the moment, actually. Monotone voice, arguably what I'm doing at the moment. Boring, too much information. Now, when we send out the slides after these presentations, you'll be able to download the slides, rather we don't send them out, we'll send you a link. You'll get these word clouds. So I think what I'm seeing is a really good summary. So now it might be the opposite. of these, but I'm going to ask you what makes a good presentation. That was nothing to do with me. Okay. All right. So those will be takeaways that you can get. Agree with everything that's on there. And I hope I can deliver against what you saw there. We're running against the clock because we were a bit later starting. So let me just move on and say what you'll learn today. How to create a persuasive story. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be about how to create a persuasive story. Then I'm going to talk about how to use memorable language. And then I'm going to talk about how to create supportive visuals. Now, this, in my opinion, is the order in which you should create a presentation. Too many people start to do a presentation by opening up a PowerPoint or the equivalent and starting to create using visuals without really thinking through their story first. So the best way to create a presentation is, first of all, to create the story that you're going to tell and make sure that it's persuasive. Secondly, to say, how can I tell that story using memorable language? And third, how to create supportive visuals. And I hope that I'm doing all three of those as I go through this presentation. So there are three stages to create a persuasive story. Think about the audience and the outcome. Create an introduction that leads you to the outcome that you want to achieve with that presentation. What do you want people to do when they go outside the room? And finally, a pyramid of information that supports the outcome that you want. Now, I'm going to go through and do an example of this, and towards the end of this segment, I'm going to have one slide that's too complicated to show you at the moment, but sums the whole thing up as a takeaway. Now, this way of doing things was invented by a lady called Barbara Minto, and she was the communications director at McKinsey. And this is the way that strategic consultancies create presentations. And you'll see this time and time again from the likes of McKinsey, the Boston Consulting Group. Oh, help me out with another one. You know, the big, expensive ones anyway. So audience and outcome, introduction, pyramid of information. I'd just like to point out here on this slide that when I've said three stages to create a persuasive presentation, that's the message of this slide. This slide only has one message. It says there are three stages and these are they. I'd also like to point out that I showed you the bullet points one at a time, rather than load you with a load of bullet points so that you start thinking to yourself, well, should I be listening to him or should I be reading the bullet points? I'm just showing you the bullet points one at a time and then saying a little bit about those bullet points. And I've got a graphic in the background, which they call a full bleed background, which you may not consciously go, oh, it's a pyramid, but subconsciously links the graphic that we've got here to what I'm trying to tell you about the pyramid principle. Hope that makes sense. Now, the first step is to think about who the audience is. The second step is to say, what is the subject I'm talking to the audience about? And the next step is, what is the question I'm answering or raising in the minds of the audience? So, for this presentation, the audience is new and aspiring consultants. The subject is presentation skills. The question I'm answering for you, the audience I'm talking to right at this moment, is how can I do good presentations? So that's the first building block of creating a story. Now that's just a pre-thinking process. Then there's the introduction. So we've done the audience and the outcome, and now we're going to do the introduction, and then there's going to be a pyramid of information. So this part coming up is the introduction. What I'm doing here is called signposting. I'm orientating you where you are in the presentation. I'm trying to help you through the story that I'm telling to you today. I hope it's not too confusing to be trying to do two things at once. It's kind of at odds with what I'm advocating, actually. The introduction has a specific structure. There's what we call the situation. Now, the situation is what you did right at the beginning, which is that presentations generally are quite bad. Now, if you can get the audience to help you define the situation, that's a really good thing, because the situation should be something that's not controversial or it's checkable. So the first thing is the situation. The next thing is what Barbara Minto calls the complication. Now, you can think of the complication also as the change to the situation. So the complication is not that presentations are bad, that's the situation. The complication is that I'm here talking to you. The complication is what changes the situation. I hope that will become clear in a minute. By the way, I usually do this as a full-day workshop, so I'm really doing my best to cram this into 30 minutes. And then there's the question. The question that's raised by the complication, and then the answer that we get. Now, bear in mind, we've already said that the answer before was, how do I do good presentations? So we say, what's the situation? What's the complication? What question does the complication imply? Does the question still match the question that we had earlier on? Don't worry, I'll show you the full flow chart of this in a minute. What's the answer? So, situation, presentations are terrible. The complication was I offered to give a presentation about presentations. I offered to help. Question, how do you do good presentations? And I say, answer, there are 3 elements to giving a good presentation. You saw those earlier on, the 3 elements. So here we are. That's the introduction. Then we get a pyramid of information. So here we go again. Presentations are terrible. I offered to help. How do we do good presentations? There are 3 elements. What are they? Story, language, and visuals. And that's what we call a pyramid of information. And each of those elements there, story, language, and visuals, might have their own pyramid. How do you create a story might be the question under that. Language might be what sort of language. Visuals might be what type of visuals. Now, people that do this a lot, remember this sequence as SCQA. You'll often hear people in those top tier consultancies say SCQA. That's my introduction. And then this is my pyramid underneath. I hope I'm not going too quickly. This is here. I mean, this will be available as a takeaway. And so here's an example for you consultants out there. Here's an example for writing a proposal. So you say to the client, you have problem X, complication. You've decided to get outside help. Question, are we the right people to help? Answer, yes, of course we are. Why are we the right people to help? We've solved this problem before. We have a proven approach to solving it, and we have good people ready to start right now. And then there's a pyramid under each of those. Now, what I forgot to say about the complication, the question, and the answer is that you don't necessarily show all of these things, and you don't necessarily do them in this sequence. You might start with, we're the right people to help you. You have this problem, and you're not going to say to them, you've decided to help. One of the things that I think the people that are inexperienced consultants forget to do is to tell the client what their perception is, the consultant's perception is, of the problem they're trying to solve. They think, well, the client already knows what problem they've got. Why am I going to tell them? And I can tell you, as a client and a purchaser of consultancy services, to have the consultant demonstrate that they understand the problem that they're trying to solve is incredibly important, because the number of times I've had consultants go off and solve the wrong problem is just incredible. So that's a basic structure. Also, here's another one for progress reports, which is you have problem X. We told you you would do Y. We've completed Y. Question: what did you find? A. Now these things, as I say, you don't have to actually say these things out loud. A good presentation comes from good structured thinking. You can use exactly the same structured thinking when you're writing a report. You know, structured presentations follow structured thinking. It may look a bit dry, and there are ways of bringing this to life, which I'll talk about in a moment. I haven't had a question. I must have just killed everybody. So this is not a slide I would ever talk to, and I have no intention of talking to. It's to give you as a takeaway of what I've just described to you, to say this is how you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's for you to download after the presentation. It's far too complicated to talk through. And always remember, as Ernest Hemingway said, the first draft of anything is rubbish. So writing a good presentation, writing a good story is an iterative process. Once you've done it, you want to go back and change it and do it again, show it to some other people. If you're doing a proposal presentation to a client, then always rehearse it in front of some other people and get them to ask you awkward questions, which the client is likely to ask you, even if it's just one person that you can muster up to critique what you're doing. I'm just going to take a quick check on time. So I've done the bit about how to create a persuasive story. That's a full-day workshop condensed into, I don't know, about 10 minutes. I hope that was quite impressive, but it might have been a bit confusing. How to use the next thing I'm going to talk about is how to use memorable language, and then I'm going to talk about how to create supportive visuals. Now I'm just need to close this down. So rhetoric. The ancient Greeks are, I believe, the originators of rhetoric. And when you've created your story, the next thing you can do is to think about, how can I use memorable language to tell that story? And contrasts are very, very powerful. When they go low, we go high. John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Threes. In the presentation I've just been doing, you'll see lists of threes all over the place. I'm not sure of the neuroscience behind it, but if you watch politicians, listen to politicians, then lists of three work particularly well, and Shakespeare knew that particularly well. One of the most powerful words you can use when you give a presentation is the word imagine. Because when you say to someone, imagine so-and-so, it immediately conjures up a picture in their head. Very, very powerful word that you can put into your presentations at key points to get people to conjure up some sort of image of what you want them to think about. Oh, what was I trying to say there? A pyramid of information. Metaphors, very, very powerful. Metaphors are very, very powerful because they leverage concepts that people are already familiar with. Personal stories. George illustrated this in his presentation when he talked about making an error. It's particularly powerful in the situation part of the story, when you can tee something up with a self-deprecating story that says how you made a mistake and what you learned from it. That's a really, really powerful thing that you can do. And sometimes the way that you use language, this Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, there is no way to happiness, happiness is the way. Now, he could have said, there is no way he didn't need to repeat happiness, is what I'm trying to say. He could have said, there is no way to happiness, it is the way. But there's a kind of a rhythm. There's more of a rhythm to this by repeating the word. So it pays when you're putting together your presentation to stop, think about the sorts of things that you're going to say and how you're going to say them. Now, in terms of supportive visuals, I'm going to go back quickly if I've got time over this presentation. I've been racing to catch up. Think about what your slides are for. Are your slides a teleprompter for you to help you get through the presentation, or do they help your audience to understand what you're trying to say? They should be there to help your audience. And for me, every slide should have just one message. And if there's more on the slide than just the one message, then everything on the slide should be supporting that message, which is at the top. Bullet points. Now, these are short bullet points, but when people see bullet points, the first thing they do is they've got a tension between listening to the person that's talking and reading the bullet points, especially if they're long, wordy bullet points. What do you want people to do? And never put up a slide that says, you probably can't read this, but. I did it myself earlier on. Napoleon's retreat from Moscow. Fascinating slide. I'm going to get it into my presentation at all costs because I've worked really hard at creating this. You know, only put stuff in your pyramid that supports the answer that you're trying to get the audience to get to. If you're going to put up some complicated data, don't put something up that says something like, don't put a heading that says something like excess deaths. Tell the people what the information on the slide is actually saying. So the information on this side, the message I want to get across, I just picked this as an example. Excess deaths are 5 times Germany in the first wave for the UK. And then the data that's on the slide supports it. The person reading the slide doesn't have to go and figure out try and think about what's this saying to me. You tell them at the top what the key message is. So 3 steps to great presentations. Create a persuasive story using the pyramid principle. Use memorable language, rhetoric, and then finally create supportive visuals. Now, I created this with a tool simply so it would be consistent. And I'm going to go back here. I hope you can all still see this screen. So one message per slide. So we had some interactivity towards the beginning. Let me just go back to here. Right, so here we are, situation. This was all situation. More situation. What will you learn today? Meaning of the slide is what you will learn today. Here come the bullet points, one at a time. 1, 2, 3. Tells you where you are. Three stages to create a persuasive story. Here come the bullet points. 1, 2, 3. Nice picture in the background. Now, I'm on a slightly different section of the presentation now, so I'm using a slightly different format slide. Who is the audience? Picture. What's the subject? What's the question I'm answering? Now I've gone into handwritten to try and illustrate that this is something that you would do yourself on a piece of paper. So it's showing we're doing something slightly different then. Now, here's my signpost to tell you where we are. We're on the introduction at that point. Then I say the introduction has a structure. Here we go. The introduction has a structure, bullet points, one at a time, picture, and one message per slide. Nice bright picture that supports what's going on the other side. Back to the handwritten stuff. We're down at our pads again. Here come the old bullet points again. Complicated picture, probably too complicated, but good to take away, illustrates the overall thing. Couple of examples to try and illustrate it. Again, this is the sort of thing you're writing on your pad. Takeaway for you. And then we've got some quotes. And I think you get the picture of how I'm going through it. I label that too much. So I'm going to come back to the very last slide. Simon, I think we started 10 minutes late, so I think I've caught up five minutes, but I'm not sure it did the presentation a lot of good to do that. But the essential message is this. You can go back and look at these slides, which is you start by creating a persuasive story. Story comes first. Language comes next. Supportive visuals come last, not first.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm sorry to make you rush through that. We probably shouldn't indulge a lot of questions as we are just a bit late. I would like to share my favourite question with you, though, and see if you have an answer to it, which is, why do you keep talking about pyramids? Does it have some special significance for you? You keep telling us about pyramids.
Yeah, well, because the structure, I'm not going to put it up again, but the structure of what comes underneath the SQA looks like a pyramid. It's as simple as that. It's a pyramid of information. That's the shape of it.
Excellent. So you're not into mystic things. It's just a management consultant pyramid.
Well, I might be into mystic things, but I'm not going to talk about that on this this forum.
Oh, I can cut it out of the video. It's not a problem. But we should move on. Thank you so much, Gary. That was great. And of course, Adam and I, who have slide packs to present straight after you, will probably embarrass ourselves terribly now that we've seen your masterwork.